Well, good afternoon, everyone. We want to welcome you to the first podcast at the U.S. Army Command General Staff College as part of the West Africa Scholar Program. Your hosts today are myself, Lieutenant Commander Martin, United States Navy, and my friend that sits across from me,
Major Larry Richardson, United States Army.
Perfect. How are you doing today, Larry?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you, Rachel?
I'm doing really well. I'm looking forward to this. So today's topic is security force assistance, also known as building partner nation capacity. As we all know, we're going to be focusing on our lovely continent of Africa. And are we getting a return on our investment? So this topic, the return of investment, tends to be the big topic currently with Congress. So why don't you get us started, Larry, and let's define what JP 3TAC20 states as far as security force assistance, aka building partner nation capacity.
Well, Rachel, so JP 3-20 defines security force assistance as one of a set of DoD activity that contributes to the U.S. government's support of the development of the capacity and capabilities of foreign service forces, mainly their security forces, and their supporting institutions. As we look at, defense institution building, Ministry of Defense, all those kind of things, whether of a partner nation or an international organization, i.e. regional security organizations. Think for Africa, the ECOWAS or the Sahel 5, which I'm sure we're going to get into later. DoD policy describes SFA as the subset of security cooperation initiatives designed to build capacity and capability in our partner force. Security activities that only serve to gain access or influence other actions that do not enhance the foreign security forces' capacity or capabilities that are outside the security sector fall outside of the scope of security force assistance. And that's really important as we look at, what used to be 1208 projects that go on across the continent. So for DoD, this may require, the DoD to develop capabilities of a non-defense partner force as a part of security force assistance. So, when we think of that, think of foreign internal defense operations that typically are conducted by, say, for example, U.S. Army Special Forces. And as we look towards a focus of security force activities and just with the foreign security forces and other interagency activities and their objectives that are always nested inside of the U.S. government's objectives. Finally, SFA activities, they are conducted to organize, train, equip, rebuild, or build, and advise foreign security forces from the ministerial or department level all the way down to the tactical level. And we see that everywhere in Africa, be it with an infantry platoon that we're training in Uganda or Niger, all the way up to building a Ministry of Defense capable organization inside of, say, Somalia on the east coast of Africa.
Hey, thanks for that, Larry. I think that's really going to help out our audience a lot. And since we're focusing on AFRICOM, General Waldhauser was speaking to the Senate here about the posture statement, and he outlined the 5 LOEs, right? So we're going to be looking at developing security and stability in East Africa, which is the number one, degrading violent extremist organizations in the Sahel and Maghreb regions, contain instability in Libya. Thirdly, contain and degrade Boko Haram and ISIS West Africa. Fourth, interdict illicit activity in the Gulf of Guinea and Central Africa. And finally, build peacekeeping, humanitarian assistance, and disaster relief capacity of African partners. So with that said, Larry, I guess one of the questions we could probably start off with is, can we achieve some of our national objectives through security force assistance alone?
So I think if you look at the national security strategy, especially with the priority action requirements for Africa, I think the answer is, yes, because the DoD has a lot of the funding, especially with DOS taking a cut in funding over this last year. The U.S. government's ability to build a partner capacity that can counter terrorists and bring regional stability, a lot of that is going to really come from DoD and how we can leverage conventional and unconventional forces to really build partners that are capable of taking the lead in conducting counterterrorism operations or really just building stability and good governance inside their own countries.
So one of the pillars of the national security strategy, Larry, is promoting American prosperity. And I'm not sure how the security force assistance plays into this. Maybe you can help me out with this and the understanding of that, how that works a little bit.
Well, so, as we look at Africa, We see a lot of great power competition going on in Africa right now. Specifically, China does a lot of investment inside of Africa through um, resource management, gaining access, providing partner forces and partner nations, essentially infrastructure support, military support. For the U.S. to gain from that, part of that is increasing the security in a lot of these countries, so that way you can get U.S. investment into these countries. So I think that by building stability through security force assistance and creating partner forces that are able to actually secure their own borders, protect their own population centers, you encourage U.S. investment. Say Nigeria with its booming oil economy, getting American companies to go in and feel safe that they can actually send in workers, build infrastructure to actually contribute to pushing forward American economic prosperity. I think I think it definitely supports it. It's not an end unto itself, but
Sure, and I don't disagree with that, but I also think we need to we need to look at the state and interagency, rejuvenating the domestic economy, promoting free, fair, and reciprocal economic relationships, lead in research, technology, invention, and innovation, promote and protect the U.S. national security innovation base, and embrace energy dominance. That's the second pillar about promoting American prosperity, and I'm not sure where I see the security forces assistance in that operation. How do you look at that, Larry?
well, as we take General Waldhauser's his posture statement and his testimony in front of the Senate Armed Services Committee, he clearly lays out that DoD and AFRICOM are not doing this alone. He specifically says, in concert with interagency and international partners, we must also contribute, i.e., AFRICOM and the U.S. government, to building the institutions that fortify, the recruiting, the training, sustaining, and fielding of forces that enable a host nation to be secure. I think he sees AFRICOM and DoD as a equal partner with the Department of State and USAID because, DOS and USAID, they contribute huge amount to security sector reform, good governance initiatives, health and protection of human population from biological and biological diseases. Let's take the Ebola example with in 2016, where DoD supported a DOS USAID initiative to help combat the Ebola crisis in West Africa. So I don't think that AFRICOM is taking it on all by itself, but I do think that General Waldhauser recognizes that the DoD does have a lot of the assets through strategic lift, through ISR, through the ability to provide resources to the DOS and USAID officials on the ground to really push forward American objectives.
So, Larry, let's take the last part of your statement there. I don't believe ISR, or for sake of argument, information collection, should be lumped into security force assistance, which prompts the question, can we achieve our national security objectives with just providing partner nations with information collection capabilities in the form of unmanned aircraft systems, some UAS?
So, Rachel, critical to those formations or our partners on the ground being able to use any UAS that we were to just provide them. Critical to that would actually be security force assistance in the training of how to utilize that UAS and training in how to maximize any potential effects that could be achieved with those UAS. So just providing a partner force with, say, a Raven without properly training them on the best techniques and procedures for the utilization of those Ravens, you won't achieve your objectives at the end.
Well, with that said, Larry, using measures of performance and measures of effectiveness, can you give a concrete example from your time in Mali where just using information collection capabilities alone would not achieve the desired end states?
So, Rachel, a perfect example of this would be MINUSMA, the UN mission in Mali, has for the first time seen the fielding of what they call the All-Source Information Fusion Unit. And essentially what this is a NATO-styled intelligence collection formation that also incorporates UAVs to provide the UN and the tactical troops on the ground ISR and intel collection capability to achieve desired end states. But what we have seen in MINUSMA over the years of their employment is that the ASIFU does not have the ability to translate the intelligence to the troops on the ground, because the troops on the ground have not been trained on how to incorporate intel collection in UAVs. Thus, they actually hinder their ability to achieve the objectives of MINUSMA, which is the reestablishment of the central government's control and legitimacy in the north of Mali.
And that's a great answer, and thank you for that. But as a follow-on question, can Department of Defense itself conduct security force assistance alone?
The interesting thing with security force assistance is that security cooperation and security assistance is a DOS initiative, and security cooperation is a DoD initiative. I think they're mutually supporting, and they are intertwined. So it's really, you can't have the success of security assistance without security cooperation, and likewise, you can't have success of security cooperation without security assistance.
Well, then I think that kind of leads us to the next question then is, can we achieve our national objectives without security force assistance if they both lead to one another?
I would say no, especially in Africa, because, we, as the U.S. government, are not going to have a DoD in the lead, right, as DOS is in the lead on the continent. But DOS needs the support because USAID and DOS, and frankly, some of the accent that we have with the United Nations, with the African Union, with, say, the French and the Sahel Five, we support their operations, which are getting after American objectives for peace and security on the continent and the delivery of humanitarian aid. We support those through, strategic lift, air refueling, all these kind of things, as well as building partner capacity. So, for example, every time, you go to certain countries on the continent, they receive a tiered training approach from, say, the United Kingdom will do the first 3 weeks of training. The French will then provide the second tier of 3-week training, and then the U.S. provides the final tier of training. So, it is a multinational approach to building a lot of these partners, but we're not doing it alone. But I think if we pulled out entirely, you would see if not a degradation in our partner forces on the continent and their operations, you would see another actor step in, that creates breathing space for an actor like China to come in and take the place of the U.S.
Well, then that kind of leads to thinking that our African countries may have come over-dependent on our U.S. assets for stability within their respective countries.
Well, and so that gets towards, that's a good point, because you don't want to build a partner force that cannot sustain an activity unless we're there on the ground, right? So, crucial to security force assistance is developing a sustainable model that partner force, that host nation, can actually continue to field personnel, equip them, train them, and then resource them on the continent. What you don't want is a partner force that is equipped with all types of American equipment, that is solely dependent on Western asset for them to do their mission. So, what that means is, just take, for example, a basic infantry platoon. They probably don't need M4s. They need AK-47 because of the ubiquity of that weapon system on the continent. It's easy to sustain, i.e. it's easy to maintain. It's easy to find ammunition for it. And they don't need all of the types of equipment that you would typically field to a regular U.S. Army infantry platoon.
But if you don't give them the equipment, then we don't need to train them, right?
Well, no, we can train them on host nation equipment. Inside, say, take for example a typical U.S. Special Forces team. They are trained in those foreign weapon systems that are found inside of their partner force. And what you're also seeing with the stand up with these new security force assistance brigades is those conventional forces are also receiving training in foreign weapons, foreign vehicles. And even how to maintain these vehicles and provide, the institutional capability for these host nations to provide repair parts and sustainability in the long run.
I mean, how long is too long, though? How by doing some research and kind of looking at the numbers, and we were able to go to the foreignassistance.gov where we can pull up some numbers there. And if you go year by year budgetarily for peace and security, it goes up and down, and there's a flux there. But what I'm not seeing is a chart for return on investment. So how long is too long, and what are we using to measure?
So this is a interesting point that's been brought up, and you kind of alluded to it in your intro there. Congress is really interested to ensure that, for every dollar we put into a partner force, that partner force needs to be capable of actually conducting the mission that they are being trained and equipped to do. So AFRICOM was actually kind of at the forefront of this because AFRICOM is more resource constrained than, say, other combatant commands like CENTCOM or PACOM. AFRICOM really had to take a concerted or methodical approach to looking at, for every program we put on the continent to build a partner force, what are the benchmarks that we are establishing to ensure that partner force is capable in the future. Part of that is really AFRICOM's assessments branch and their assessment plan. So what they do is they do an annual assessment with the country team and then with also the U.S. forces that are on the ground there to do essentially a partner force combat capability assessment. Those are then lined up against the objectives that are laid out in anywhere from a 1-year plan to a 5-year plan or a planning horizon, to ensure that we're moving the ball forward and that no one force simply stagnates at, say, a tier 1 when we need them to be a tier 3 capable partner force.
And so what I see stagnate a lot of time is the turnaround time for getting those reports done. Would you agree with that?
I think that, it takes a lot of work. So an annual report, you have to essentially start compiling it at the beginning of every year. And it is very easy to fall behind on those reporting mechanisms, and that drives your programs in the future. So it's easy to fall behind. I think AFRICOM is doing the due diligence, and only time will tell. Their assessment program, from what I understand, is only a couple years old. And I can't speak for the other combatant commands, but I know that AFRICOM has been held up pretty highly for its success in being able to actually measure its effectiveness over the last 2 to 3 years. Now, whether that will hold true for the next 5 years, that's yet to be seen. Because, like I said, their assessment program is fairly new. But I think they're moving in the right direction, and it'll be a lot easier to course correct as opposed to starting all over again.
So finally, let's go to kind of somewhere that's a little more Army, and let's talk about FM3 as far as security force assistance is concerned. We've discussed the implications of security force assistance in Africa, but as the Army looks towards the future and utilizing the revamped FM3, what are the implications as you see it on the consolidation area?
So, with the new FM30, the consolidation area, there's a lot of stability tasks that take place inside of the consolidation area. Everything from establishing civil security, establishing civil control, restoring essential services, supporting the good governance, support of economic and infrastructure development, and finally, conducting security cooperation. As part of the consolidation of gains, per the FM30, it enhances military engagement and builds the security capacity of a partner state. These, I think, pose a great opportunity for the new security force assistance brigades. As we've learned here in CGSC, consolidation of gains is kind of a new concept that a lot of field grades like ourselves are tackling, because it's a break from the last 17 years of combat in Iraq and Afghanistan, in the sense of that our pure focus was on conducting security cooperation. Now we're doing security cooperation essentially behind the front lines while other offensive operations are going on. What that means is that, how it's kind of been templated is that you have to assign a force that is doing all of the stability tasks while simultaneously there is an offensive or a defensive high intensity conflict going on in the same theater, as opposed to like stability tasks being the sole mission of a unit on the ground. And I think this poses a great opportunity for the Army to start aligning these security force assistance brigades to actually be the command element behind the front line of combat operations in the consolidation zone that frees up your more conventional forces to do that multi-domain battle that may still be ongoing, but simultaneously you have to consolidate your gains after your offense, and you don't want to take away an armor brigade from the front line to do stability activities if there's still a fight out there. So I think the fielding of these security force assistance brigades may pose as a good sourcing solution to stability tasks simultaneously supporting ongoing offensive operations in the same AOR. Conflict from post-conflict activities.
Yeah, and that makes sense to me.
Well, and so we will see with the deployment of these new security force assistance brigades into Afghanistan, and whether or not the next one goes to Africa is yet to be determined. But right now, that's going to be kind of the test bed because it is phase 4. But, I think simultaneously, it poses a great test bed for when we do, if we ever get into a high intensity conflict with a peer opponent, maybe these security force assistance brigades will be in the division consolidation zone or, what have you, actually conducting the stability tasks while, the conventional forces are still fighting whatever that peer adversary may be.
So final question to you, Larry. Are we getting a return on investment?
In my opinion, I think we are getting a good return on the investment. But part of that is just ensuring that whatever the combatant commander or that theater commander has assigned as objectives for stability activities, that those partner forces are moving forward and being able to secure themselves so that you don't create a situation where the guarantor of security inside of a nation state in the United States and not that host nation.
So from my standpoint, the answer is yes, we are getting a return on investment with security force assistance. The reason we are getting it, and that's an easy answer, is because we can't achieve the national objectives without it. So with that said, I want to thank everybody for tuning in to the West Africa Scholar Program podcast, and we look forward to you joining us next time.
All right. Thanks, Rachel.
Hey, thanks, Larry.
Bye.